Welcome back to our latest video. We're going to preview the Arizona game this week, and the Buffs are turning the page from Oregon State, so I guess we should too, right?
If we don't ever have to talk about that football game again, it would be too soon.
Yeah, well, that's what we were hoping about that Kansas game in 2010, but this year's team made us talk about that Kansas game from 2010. So let's move on from Oregon State, sort of, because obviously what happened last week could come into play this week. So, your thoughts, it's a short week, and so we've only been around players for a couple of days this week as opposed to our usual three. Mm-hmm. Just kind of your thoughts as you've listened to Mike MacIntyre and players this week.
If there's ever a week you don't mind it being a short week if you're a player or a coach, this is the type of week.
Yeah.
Usually they have Sundays off. This week they were back. They didn't have a full practice just because they're banged up, obviously, the day after a game, but they had walkthroughs, meetings, and I think that's a benefit for this program. It's interesting that they held a players-only meeting, which can go one of two ways. We've seen it really rejuvenate a group of guys in sports before, and sometimes it just doesn't matter. Sometimes you can talk to you're blue in the face, and so we'll see how that works out. I really genuinely think the leadership on this team is much better than it was last year, but I don't know if that necessarily guarantees them anything going forward. We'll see.
I think it's also a good thing, not only a short week, but a short week on the road where you can get the team away from the distractions of home a little bit. And sometimes teams bond a little bit on the road, and I've had a couple players tell me they actually like going on the road sometimes because they bond a little bit more. You get them away in more of a bonding situation this week on the road, maybe that helps as well. But I agree with you. I think the leadership is much better than it was last year. And I think it starts with one of the guys that's been widely criticized for his leadership, and that's Steven Montez. And, my colleague Pat Rooney talked to him after the game, and I loved what he had to say. I mean, just a mature perspective on what's going on, saying, look, this is 18, 19 to 22-year-old kids that – we don't want to lose, and we don't like this, and he just had a mature perspective about it, I thought. And so I've heard players this week, Rick Gamboa was one, saying, look, a lot of them have said, basically admitted that they either not necessarily overlooked Oregon State, but when they got up 31-3, overlooked them, and how that might.
I thought we weren't going to talk about that game anymore.
But how that may have helped and maybe slapped them in the face and said, okay, we can't do that again. And so that's where maybe the leadership comes into play here.
Well, you have that type of collapse. You definitely don't want that to ever happen again.
Right.
So I totally get that. Montez has really stepped up. We talked about that earlier in the week, and we heard there were younger guys that made their voices heard during that players-only meeting.
Yeah.
There are a lot of stud sophomores on this team, so that makes sense that those guys would try to step up and be leaders as well.
The one thing I haven't liked about this week is the one guy that everybody wants to hear kind of step up and take some ownership hasn't done it, and that's Mike MacIntyre. And even today, he points to little things that the guys did, and I even asked him a direct question: what could you personally have done when you look back at that? And he kind of deflected it, and I thought that was disappointing for me. We've talked about it before. We might have talked about it on the previous video that Tad Boyle is one that would come in and would sit down and say, "This is on me."
Yeah.
And I like how he does that. Even several days after, and a direct question, "What could you have done?" Mike doesn't do that, and I think that's disappointing.
He did say you look at the film, you second-guess a million different things, but to your point, it's not about specifics. It's not about taking ownership of what happened on Saturday. We're 6 years in, though, Brian. You said you're disappointed. If you expect that to change, I think you're going to keep getting disappointed.
Yeah, I agree. But it's just one of those things that I know it bugs fans, and I don't know if it bugs players or not, but, I know it bugs fans to not have him sit down and say, look, this is on me, because I think a lot of times you see coaches do that. And so that's one thing about this week that I think is disappointing.
Okay.
But like you said, it's one thing about the last 6 years that might be disappointing. So let's move on to this week. I mean, what do you think the keys are this week against Arizona? Arizona's a team that's coming off probably its best game of the year.
Well, a key would be to get Laviska Shenault back, right?
Right.
But we don't know if that's going to happen. MacIntyre said he moved around, but very vague in terms of what he's doing.
We're all moving around, right?
We're all moving around. That's true. This team is so much better when number two's out there.
Yeah.
If he's out there, I like Colorado's chances in this game. If he's not, I have a hard time thinking that Colorado's getting out of that game with a victory. You have to get better secondary play. That's another obvious thing here.
Yeah.
Khalil Tate, while he's not Joe Montana or Andrew Luck, he's gotten better as a passer, and he's had to because he had that ankle injury that really limited him and took away his his best weapon, his
Right.
legs early in the season. So he had a good day throwing the ball against Oregon in their big upset victory there. So, Arizona's coaches put on the tape of the Oregon State game, and
Right.
Trey Udofia, if he's out there, he's going to get picked on, and he's got to step up to that challenge. Dante Wigley, same thing. Delrick Abrams Jr., you would think having another week to come back from that calf injury should be healthier. That will help. But then on the back end of that secondary, Evan Worthington, we don't know if he's going to play.
It sounds like he's going to be out. The way
Okay.
kind of, if you listen to how they're talking, even Mike McIntyre mentioned these guys are going to have to step up a little bit more.
Well, they have a concussion protocol, so
Yeah.
if he's cleared, I guess that's okay. But he's had 3 concussions in the last 8-9 months.
Right.
You got to be concerned about that. Kyle Trago, you mentioned on Monday, is going to be out for the first half. So Darian Rakestraw's got to step up, and Nick Fisher's got to be a leader back there on the back end. So I look to that secondary and what they can do. And J.J. Taylor, Arizona's dynamic, versatile playmaker. No other Power 5 player has more all-purpose yards at this point in the season. So they've got some firepower offensively, Arizona does. And so it's going to be a tough challenge.
Yeah, and I don't know which one will start between Udofia or Wigley, but one of them has to be out there. You would think, unless they go with like a Ronnie Blackman or a Mekhi Blackman, something like that, which that'd be a drastic move at this point. I mean, you hope that Udofia or Wigley get better this week. But I agree with you. I think secondary play is huge in this one. That, to me, when I go back and watch the game that we are not supposed to talk about anymore, that was as big as anything in the collapse was that secondary play. That's got to get better this week against Khalil Tate that's throwing better, and they have to stop J.J. Taylor. I think they've done a good job against the run for the most part, but they have to stop him. I expect J.J. to get 100 yards, but it's got to be like 110 and not 190.
Yeah. And on the other side of the ball, give Steven Montez some help. He threw for over 300 yards. Should have had a lot more with all those drops that they had in that game. The offensive line, I feel like beating a dead horse at this point. So give the man some help. He's putting it out there on the line for you guys, and you need to rally behind him.
Yeah, got to catch the ball. Need to run the ball better. I mean, against one of the worst run defenses in the country, they had over 200 yards, but take out McMillan's 75-yard run and Stevens' 49-yard scramble, and it was like 93 yards on 34 carries, and that's not going to get it done. And yes, I know part of the run game is you bust those big plays every once in a while. So if they can get a couple of those, that'd be huge as well. That'll help Steven, but he needs some help. I thought he played really well the other day.
Yeah, he did. He's played pretty well all season, aside from a couple mistakes here and there. I don't think you could ask much more out of number 12 this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. So let's get to our predictions this week. You've kind of alluded to yours, so I'll just let you go first. Your thoughts?
It's a tough game to predict because we don't know if Laviska Shenault's going to play. Also, on the other side, Arizona has been a Jekyll and Hyde type team this year.
Yeah.
We saw them lose by 27 points to Houston, get blown out at Utah, and then they come back and beat a top 20 program last week in dominating fashion. So I think a big part of why they were Jekyll and Hyde was Khalil Tate's ankle. He takes a week off. They lose to UCLA, but he comes back and has one of his best games of the season. I have a bad feeling about this game for Colorado, but at the same time, I don't think it's a huge mismatch, and I think Colorado will hang in the game. I'll say Arizona wins the game 35-31.
Well, Adam, we've been pretty similar on our picks most of this season. I'm going to go a little bit different this week. I'm going to say that the team meeting they had this week kind of gets them right. I'm going to say that the leadership steps up on this team, and Laviska Shenault or not, I think they don't drop 6 passes this week. I think they come out and they use what happened last week as a source of strength a little bit, and they come out. And the fact that Arizona is that Jekyll and Hyde team, I don't think we're going to see the same Arizona as last Saturday. I think the Buffs win this thing 34-27.
All right, if that happens, you have 6 wins, you have 3 games left. How much have you erased the monstrosity that happened here at Folsom Field last Saturday?
I don't think you can erase it because I think that ultimately is going to take away what this team could have done. I think that, yes, that mathematically they're still in the South race, but I think they're really not, in a lot of ways. I think that Oregon State's going to probably ultimately prevent them from really winning the South. But I think that if you win this game, they come back over the next 3 games. They got the next 2 at home. I think it gives them some confidence against a couple pretty good teams coming home.
Mike McIntyre was on most hot seat lists going into 2016. So I remember that CSU game in 16 being of a huge game for him and his job security.
Yeah.
I feel like this week's game is huge. if you go out and you get absolutely destroyed at Arizona, this season is rolling downhill in a hurry.
It is, and I think that the way that Colorado responds this week really, to me, dictates his future here at Colorado. I mean, I think if they don't respond well, if they finish this thing 5-7, which I went and did some research, since 1997, only one other team, Power 5 team, has ever started 5-0 and finished 5-7. So if they do that, that's an epic collapse that he's not going to recover from. I mean, I think he's gone for sure. So yeah, he's coaching for his job, I think, and they can't lay an egg. I mean, they can go out and play well and still be okay, but they can't lay an egg this week.
Yeah, and if you don't find a win in Tucson, you come back home against Washington State and Utah, two of the hottest teams, maybe the best teams in the conference.
Yeah.
And Cal has shown some life here recently.
Cal just beat Washington.
So, yeah. There's a lot of pressure on this program going out to Tucson.
There's a lot of pressure. This is a big, big game, which, ultimately it made last week really big, which, I remember last week we talked about it. I mean, it was really a big game because it would set up momentum for the last 4 games, but it's reversed itself. But they've got to come back this week and somehow try to pick up the pieces and get it done.
You going to get some Mexican food while you're down there in Tucson?
I'm going to look for it. I'm going to try to figure out where Guy Fieri has been, the diners, drive-ins, and dives guy. I've got to go where he's been, so we'll see. Are you?
I might try to work in. I'm not the in-and-out person that goes right from the airport there, but if I haven't had it in a couple of years, maybe I'll find an in-and-out, and who knows? They've done this a couple times when the Colorado's run on the road. They've treated them to in-and-out, so maybe that's their motivation this week.
In fact, they did that 2 years ago down in Tucson, so maybe they get some in-and-out this week. For this program, for the psyche of the fan base, I think that'd be huge if the Buffs can get some in-and-out after this game.
Yeah, get a double-double, a little animal-style action. Yeah, be good.
I think they would love that. And Adam and I will be back after the Arizona game to recap that game.